Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Brett Simmons, director of You Might Be the Killer, and a lot of other cool things.
This has been years up?
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I brought some coffee since it says on your IMDb that you're a big coffee drinker.
Hey, same.
I think we have a similar cup because I like mine boiling hot at all times. So
I'm gonna say I got to keep mine in my Yeti.
Yes, yeah. All right. Now I think we're friends already.
Yeah, bonding fast, man.
Yeah. So, like I said, this was in like years in the making because when You Might Be the Killer first came out, I was a big fan of it, and I think we all were on the show. And for some reason, it never happened, but now it's happening. And so, when you first made that movie, like, what was like the story behind it? How did the idea come about?
Well, You Might Be the Killer was really funny because it all came from the producer at the time who was making the movie. I had worked with on some other projects, and he had the rights to the it's just so bizarre, but he had the rights to the Twitter thread that Sam Sykes and Chuck Wendig did. And so I just got called with hey, I got the rights to this Twitter thread. I want to turn to a movie. And I was like, what did how do you even get the rights to a Twitter thread? I absolutely wondered that myself. I was like, how the heck? And then I was also like, are we at this point that like that's what we're doing now? So we're adapting Twitter threads? Like I didn't even understand how that was possible. But then when they sent it to me, and I hadn't yet known who Sam Sykes and Chuck were, so I didn't realize there were these like amazing authors and that their Twitter thread was hilarious. And I immediately got it once I read it. I was like, okay, this isn't really just a Twitter thread. There's actually a lot more stuff here. So the next conversation was just about like, what would we do with it? Is there a full story? And I felt like the Twitter thread was, one, very funny. Two, I felt that it introduced kind of at the core of it, a friendship between two people that I was like, this could be enough to hang a story on as well, on these two characters. But then also like the conversation kind of introduced a few ideas that I felt like, okay, we could really mine these and make these where the story kind of, we start to add a lot of meat to it, And so when I threw out my ideas for what we could do, everyone was super excited and we were off to the races, but it was just a really odd start.
Yeah. Because, like people make stuff now from creepy pasta, which is, stuff online, but there are actually stories written. But the more I think about it, though, it is best to get some type of permission or rights, or else you would be like taking someone's, ideas.
Yeah. And I do think the original idea, too, is that they wanted them to write it, Sam and Chuck, because they are incredibly well-established writers and they've written some awesome stuff. I'm like so much more familiar now, but I think that was the other idea was let's get the rights and get them to write it. And I think they tossed it around a little bit, but then in the end, what really happened was there was a crazy turnaround where they were like, hey, we love this. We want to make it like tomorrow. Was like, not literally, but, might as well have been with how fast the schedule. So I think for them, that was kind of a, we're kind of new to the movie writing thing. Yeah. And that seems too fast to pull off. And so that's when it turned into, well, we'll give you the rights and find someone else to write it.
Yeah. Have they seen, I assume they've seen the movie since then.
Yeah, they've seen it. They were all, and they also weighed in a lot on the script, which was really generous of them. They were involved and they had some great input, and yeah, they saw it. They dug it. They thought it all worked well. So yeah, they're awesome.
I don't like to make the interview about me, but similar story to my movie that's playing in a couple weeks in LA was it not a Twitter thread, but it was me and my friend Michael were having a Facebook Messenger discussion, and then it led to let's make this.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, what's really funny is like I get it, where it's like so many movies, period, come from just the germ of a conversation. It's like every single thing has been me with either a buddy or with a fellow writer, or somebody just exploring, man, what if this or what if that, or isn't this hilarious? Then all of a sudden the germ of an idea comes from it. So that's not really surprising at all. I feel like that's where they all and generally originate from. You just don't normally have to get the rights to that conversation from somebody else.
Right. Yeah. So I assume you're a long-time horror fan.
Oh yeah, big time. It's actually funny because I've always kind of had like a taste for the macabre, but I'm like a big wimp, so I didn't actually start diving into horror movies until I was a teenager. When I was a kid, I wasn't like the kid that was like sneaking off watching Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween. I didn't even have the guts to watch one until I was like 13, 14 years old. But then I was like a hardcore fan. Like from that point on, I was just like in love with the genre. So yeah, I love it. But I also love comedies. So that's what was funny was You Might Be the Killer was kind of like the first time. All the movies I'd done prior were straight horror movies. And it was finally an opportunity for me to flex my comedy muscles too, which was kind of just heaven for me.
I think those are the two genres that work best with an audience because you have you can laugh together or be like shocked together. You don't want to sit around and just cry together watching, Schindler.
Right. It really does amplify the shared experience. Like I totally agree. And I feel like it's been said to death by so many people, but I remember Alfred Hitchcock at one point had an anecdote saying that horror and comedy were the same. You're just trading they're both punchline based, so they're the same. You're just trading laughs for screams. And it's really true. Like you gotta think real hard about your audience. You got to be paying attention to the room and kind of have your finger on the pulse of everybody that's viewing it in order to deliver, whether it's going to be a joke or a scare. And I love that because, like you said, like I love the theater experience. I love sharing a movie with a group of people, and the screams and the laughs are the most audible way to know that you are, because you're right, like in a drama, and there's some great dramas, but I don't really know if everyone's having to. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't know if we're all crying. I don't know how we're
burst down into audible sobs. Would be maybe a little extreme reaction to your movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really entertaining to see like your buddies get scared. Or like it's hilarious when your buddies see how freaked out you're getting, and there's nothing really like it. It's just such an immediate payoff.
Mm-hmm. And I always think the best horror comedies, there's probably some exceptions, but both the horror and the comedy has to work. So like the horror has to look cool, or else it becomes something different, I think. But so like all the horror looks good, all the kills and the mask and everything looks good. And
no, thanks, man. No, I mean that was always really important because I the scary movies, and I'm not ripping those because they're their thing and they're funny, but they're not scary. They're not even trying to be scary. They're just lampooning the genre, and it's funny. But what's missing is those movies don't have real life and death stakes, and for me, that was the most important thing with You Might Be the Killer, was making sure that this wasn't a spoof. It's like, I'm not trying to compare it to Scream. I don't think that's worthy, but like Scream and Cabin in the Woods are two of my favorites, where there's a lot of really funny kind of meta humor, but it's all in the context of an actual life or death situation, and I've always felt that Ghostbusters is one of the best horror comedies because it gets so much credit for being a comedy, but that movie was terrifying first for me before it was funny.
The ghosts look great in the original.
Oh, they look great. The stakes are real. The city's in danger. Dana, like Sigourney Weaver, her life is literally threatened and taken over by this thing, and like the danger, it's not a joke, but what's funny is how people are reacting to it. And to me, that's where horror comedies have failed, where they can afford to succeed a little bit better, is if the horror is treated as legitimate, it's okay for people to have hilarious reactions to it because that's real life. It's like half the time that me and my buddies like go to Halloween horror nights or anything like that, I'm typically the one that's invited so that they can laugh at me, because my own reactions are real to me. I'm genuinely terrified, but they're hilarious to everyone watching me because I'm such a scaredy cat, right? Mm-hmm. That's comedy for them, but it's horror for me, and that's where I think horror comedy actually could be better married in general is just the fact that people have hilarious reactions to being terrified, but they're real reactions for them. You know, they're not like winking at the camera, just like, oh no.
Right.
But like I said, when I was a kid, I was, because I was such a wimp for watching horror movies, but I was so interested in just kind of like the darker, spooky stuff. You know, I loved Scooby-Doo. And the thing about Scooby-Doo was like, that show freaked me out. You know, like the ghosts were scary when I was a kid. And Shaggy and Scooby had very funny reactions to them, but their reactions weren't, hey guys, look how funny we are. They were like, oh my God, we're going to die. And then running in place for 3 seconds, you know, and that was kind of one of the things I've also always really held on to was it's okay for characters to be in a terrifying situation that they react in a comical way, but it's still very scary.
Yeah. I always think Fright Night's one of the first self-referential horror comedies.
It's a great one. I love Fright Night.
It's very similar to Scream, where, you know, everyone in the movie knows the rules of the genre.
Yeah. You know, that actually came up
everything,
too.
like you said, it is life and death in the movie.
That came up a lot with You Might Be the Killer with the, because like with Scream, like everybody knowing everything, I felt like that was really a turning point in the genre in the sense that, you know, all the horror movies we grew up watching, horror was still a relatively new genre in the sense of the slasher film, right? And like, you know, like Wes Craven and John Carpenter and like all those guys, like it was really like the renaissance of horror, and movies weren't in the center of the zeitgeist at the level that they are right now. And so that was our big debate with You Might Be the Killer, was how much we should be referencing other horror movies or not. And I was like, well, the whole basis of Sam and Chuck's Twitter thread was kind of being self-aware. But I also had a bit of it wasn't an argument, it was a debate back and forth. What would be the best option about how the characters would deal with the situation? And I was like, we made it in 2018. But even today, I'm like, I don't know how we could portray a world where people are working at a camp and not thinking about Jason Voorhees, right?
Yeah.
Like that actually seems weird. Whereas in the Friday the 13th movies, it would be weird for them to be referencing horror movies, for them to be going, oh, what about Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers? Because it was just kind of still in its infancy, so to speak. But today we're all so savvy. It'd be really weird to act like we didn't know. And that's kind of what Scream, I think, really started to introduce people to, was, hey, like we all know these movies. And if this was happening to us, there's no way that we wouldn't be factoring in some of these things we've now grown up with as influences on our responses to the situation.
Yeah. So like everyone, like, so they'd have like a base knowledge of all this stuff. And then if you're a hardcore horror fan, then maybe you get some more of the deeper references, but it's not going to take away from the movie if you don't.
Yeah. And that was kind of the rule, was it should never be something that it should never take anybody out of the story. It should never feel like it's a joke that's servicing itself. It should feel like everything is constantly serving the character motivation and the story going ahead, you know.
I watched it again for the interview, and I was like, anyway, but watch it again. Something I noticed is it's almost like a franchise of movies, like the first 4 movies kind of put into one, because it goes from kind of like he's like a real life killer, then there's supernatural stuff, and then he, not the spoil movie, then he's like undead. So it's kind of like the only thing you miss, like him going to space, like in a future sequel. But I think that's interesting too.
That's really funny. I appreciate that. I definitely, we also had debate about how far to go. You know, the biggest debate of all, I think, was how soon to reveal whether or not that, spoiler alert, Sam is the killer. But in my mind, I was like, it's kind of in the title. I feel like people are sitting down.
That. Yeah. If anyone wanted the title change because of that.
Yeah. Well, at one point, we when we premiered at Fantastic Fest in 2018, which was awesome, we premiered with the premiere title was You Might Be the Killer, but we were accepted, and all the way up until the premiere, the movie was called Dead Counselors. The script was written as You Might Be the Killer, and then it was changed to Dead Counselors in the hope of maybe that this was kind of a little more tongue in cheek and didn't quite tilt the audience towards spoiling like where the movie was going. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know how long we can really draw this out before people are going to be way ahead of us.
Yeah.
And so in the end, they were like, well, let's keep the original title. And I just always felt that we needed to know early on that we need to reveal early on that Sam was the killer, because I felt like otherwise we were going to be milking it for too long and the audience was going to like get it before we told them, and then they're going to hate the experience, right? There's nothing worse than feeling like you're watching a movie where the filmmakers think that they have you, and you're like, no, I'm just waiting for you to tell me what I've already figured out a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, that was our big debate, was how long to keep that.
I also think You Might Be the Killer is a much more the title is more interesting. I do think Dead Counselor is a little more generic. Like this could be any type of horror movie.
I felt exactly the same way. I'm glad you felt that way too. I was like, I always kind of approach these things as a fan first, and I'm like, man, if I saw a poster that said You Might Be the Killer, I'm going to be way more intrigued than Dead Counselors. Like, as cute as the title is, I was like, I don't know that necessarily evokes quite the intrigue.
Yeah, it really could be anything. And I know people, and I grew up going to video stores too. And like you would pick the movie off the video thing, but you still do that today. I think it's even more important for your title or your poster to stand out, since there's so many things to choose from online.
Totally agree. I feel like with how saturated the market is, you kind of have to try and you really just have to kind of swing big. It's like, even if you blow it, at least swing as big as you can, because otherwise you're just going to get lost in the noise.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good point too, because I get a lot of screeners for the show over the year, and to me, I'd rather watch a movie that's technically maybe not great, but you could tell like they're trying to do something different, or they were having fun making it, as opposed to something maybe technically made well, but is very like the same thing I've seen a million times and just run of the mill. Like, that's probably the least interesting thing for me to watch.
I'm with you 100%. It's kind of where I think that superhero movies are kind of struggling right now, is it's so many of them are so familiar with, and the audiences are just so familiar now. Just kind of like, at this point, there's so many of you, and I don't really know how different you are. Like, I'm just kind of waiting to check out the one that feels like it's kind of going a little bit bolder than everything else.
Yeah. My brother's a big comic book fan, but I agree with you. I was into him for a while, but it's just, you've seen so many of them.
I know. That's my other big love is comic books, and I'm like, it's crazy for me to feel tired with them because I'm like, I love these.
Yeah.
But it is kind of going back to what you were saying about the horror movies, how there's so many horror movies that I'm most excited by the ones that are kind of taking the biggest swing and making the biggest splash, because otherwise it just kind of feels monotonous. I don't even know if I can get through the whole movie, because we're also, again, familiar with the genre. We're so savvy. If it starts to feel like something we've seen before, kind of tune out and forget it.
Yeah. I know you mentioned festival, and that's what I like about festivals is you usually see a lot of different type of movies that you.
Yeah.
And what's cool is a lot of times you'll see them before they go to Shudder or whatever, but there's also movies I've seen that either didn't come out for years or never came out. And it's both cool that I got to see it, but it's also like, if I think about it's kind of sad, like this was cool, but I don't think it ever was released anywhere.
Yeah, I know. It really is true, isn't it? Like, sometimes at festivals, you see crazy movies that you would never otherwise see somewhere else. And then to not see them get the audience they deserve is a real bummer.
Yeah. And I also like going in blind as much as possible, which is easier to do at a festival than seeing, all the trailers.
That's harder to do now than ever. And that is really the coolest part about festivals, is like, really all you have is a title and a one-line synopsis to go off of, right? And you just sit down and like I was at a festival, You Might Be a Killer. One of its other screenings was at the Telluride Horror Fest, which is an awesome festival in Telluride. And they were playing that movie Terrified. And I was like, this looks cool. I mean, I don't really know what it is. And I went in so blind, and I was like rocked. I was like, oh my, I'm glad I knew nothing about this movie. This was awesome.
Yeah. The last ones that they had like a sneak preview of Barbarian before, like, people really knew about it, and that's definitely a movie you don't want to know anything about when you go into it.
Right. That's what everyone keeps saying. I haven't gotten to watch it yet. I know a lot of the crew that worked on it, so I've kind of been aware of it. I'm like, man, I want to go see it just because I want to see what everybody's been up to. But then now everyone's talking about it. I'm like, geez, I really got to get out and go see this thing before it's spoiled for me.
Yeah. So your first short that I was reading that then it became your feature was Husk. So
yeah.
Was that really due to the festivals? Like people got interested in it, or?
Well, it really was like it. So Husk was my senior thesis out of high school. Not high school, college. At this point, college feels like high school, but it was my senior thesis in film school, and I just really wanted to make the short. I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back. I'm trying to say this as if anyone else is considering the notion. I had already made so many short films in film school. My mind was kind of already outside of film school. Like, what the heck am I going to do? And so I wanted to make a horror movie. And I wanted to make something that felt more like a pitch for a feature than a short film. And so Husk it's ridiculous because Husk is like 28 minutes long. Like it's barely a short film. And I didn't care because I was like, nope, I'm just showcasing a bigger story I could tell. I really thought I knew what I was doing. But then what was crazy was it got accepted into the Sundance Film Festival. So it went and played at Sundance, and it was just kind of a big serendipitous thing because it was a year that Sundance had some distance from showcasing a lot of horror, and they were like, we need to come back. So a lot of the programmers were like, we really need to up our horror game this year. And so they were really looking for horror shorts to showcase, and they just happened to really dig Husk. And so Husk had a real big showing at Sundance that kind of changed everything for me. And so from there, it all paid off. I was completely oblivious and just guessing that I could pitch a feature with a short film. But then sure enough, because of Sundance, that's all everyone wanted to talk about. It was like, talk with me about was, what would the feature be? And what's the bigger story here? And I already had it kind of laid out and was in the process of finishing writing it, so it worked out well. The process took a lot longer than I would have liked, but it all worked out. And that's ultimately where the feature came from, was the festival success of the short.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a lot of times I ask people, because I'm always interested why people make shorts, because I would think it's to I want to show people what I'm going to do to either make that into a feature or a different feature. But I know a lot of people who only make shorts, and nothing against that, but I always wonder what the goal is with that, because I don't really know what you either put them on YouTube, or I guess there's a little more platforms you can put them on now than there used to be. But for the most part, they'd play at festivals and then they'd either disappear or just pop up on YouTube.
Yeah, there are definitely more outlets now than there were before, for sure. But it's funny because short films are, in my opinion, a very different art form. It's like the length of it, the structure of it. I equate it to reading a Stephen King novel versus reading a Stephen King short story. And Stephen King short stories are phenomenal, but they don't work I can't say this about all of them. I'm just generically saying they don't necessarily lend themselves to features because they're kind of conceived as a short, almost like a creepypasta, right? Where it's like, it's conceived as this very brief, concise thing, and they don't always lend themselves. And so on one hand, I'm like, man, the short films are really cool to master, but then I know what you mean. Like, if it's not leading towards a feature, I'm not sure what, for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm not still making short films, but I do love them.
Yeah. We do Severed Limbs, our own film festival, a virtual film festival. I started cool. during COVID when it first started, because I missed going to festivals, and I thought it was fun just for everyone to get together and watch them. And I still love short films. I'm just always interested, what people's end goal in making them are.
Yeah, I get it. Like, all the short films I've watched that I've really liked have led to features. And so I've just kind of, from my own background, just kind of assumed that's where it went. But you're right. There's some incredible filmmakers out there that are just completely dedicated to that art form specifically.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
You said about punchline, that comedy and horror both are punchline driven. I think a lot of shorts are the same way. Like, you have one punchline for your
Yes.
movie for like the end, and that's like, but that's hard to stretch
Totally.
out into a feature then.
Yeah, I think the best short films, at least for me, are the ones that work exactly like that, like a one punchline, you know, setup, and then payoff and punchline. I love that. I think the best short films do that. But yeah, like you said, that doesn't always necessarily lend itself to a bigger story.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting either way.
Like the best one is my favorite example is Lights Out with David Sandberg.
Yes, I was actually
like
thinking of that, but yeah,
like that short freaked me out. And so when they're going to make a feature, I was like, but the short is so contained and so specific. It's more just kind of a moment in a feature. And then I realized, oh, yeah, that's what the feature did. If you view it like this is one incident, what is the larger cause for why an incident like this would happen? And okay, now I get it. It's really cool. Like that's a great example of going from a perfect short to a great movie.
Yeah. So where was the Rings of Saturn store that you filmed at?
So that was Rings of Saturn was in Lafayette, Louisiana. We shot You Might Be the Killer in Lafayette.
Okay.
And it was funny because my co-writer on the movie, Tom Vitale, his background, he used to run sci-fi. And that's actually where Tom and I had some history because he was involved on an executive level on a couple of other movies that I had done and was a fan, and he and I got along really well. And when he and I were writing the movie and we needed to like name the comic book shop, it was like, is it a comic book shop or is it more like a memorabilia store? And it's more like a pop culture store. It was kind of like my thought because I'm like, it needs to have horror movies, but video stores don't really exist anymore. So it's like probably needs to have like Funko dolls and comic books and be kind of like just a nerd store, really.
Yeah.
But we needed to name it. The actual store is in Lafayette. It's called what is it? Books for Less? Something not that exciting.
Yeah.
But then because of Tom's sci-fi background, he's like, oh, let's name it the Rings of Saturn, just as like a nod to the Sci-Fi Channel. Oh, cool. Awesome. So yeah.
No, it totally works. And I assumed it was a real place since it's really, it's got so much stuff in there.
All we did was change the sign, and then we brought in the globe that was like in the lobby and a few posters and stuff. But yeah, otherwise everything else was there. During the day it operated. We had to shoot at night because people weren't in there playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like they had like tournaments and stuff. And
yeah, I was a big
awesome.
D&D kid back in the 80s.
Yeah. It was a cool place. They went all out on that.
Yeah. It's kind of weird when I was growing up, played D&D, watched, silly horror movies and great horror movies, and watch pro wrestling, all this stuff that was not cool in the 80s, but it would be cool today. It's a much different
I was
world.
going to say, if you were able to supplant your 80s self into today, it'd be very different. I grew up going to Comic-Con all the time. And when I was a kid, I mean, I got flack for it. Be like, oh my gosh, you're going to Comic-Con? And now everyone's like, can you help me get tickets to Comic-Con? Like everybody wants to go. I'm like, where were you guys when?
Yeah. Well, like what you're saying earlier, but everyone knows horror stuff. Like I grew up, it was really hard to get like a t-shirt with any kind of horror movie on. But now you can go to Walmart and they have like little kids shirts with zombies and stuff on. It's
so true. I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, I literally was just at Target and they had like a Nightmare on Elm Street t-shirt. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's everywhere now. It's awesome though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'll be honest, I buy some at there because they have some stuff that, it's like $8. And,
totally.
Yeah, I get it. So how about casting? Because you had some great, the whole cast is great, but you have some, pretty name actors in it. Allison Hannigan.
Oh, thanks, man. We really lucked out because, like I said, the schedule was so fast. We kind of wrote the script shooting from the hip. We didn't really have a whole lot of time to contemplate whether this was even all of the right decisions. They were just the best decisions in the time frame we had, And so then when it came to casting, we needed to cast really quickly, and it really came down to there's people we would want, but also who's available and who can like show up as quickly as we would need them to,
Mm-hmm.
And Fran Kranz was just a dream come true for me. I love him. And he is awesome in the movie. It's really just because he's awesome. Like he made my job so easy because he got it. And what was really great was he and I kind of endeared ourselves to each other early on, because before he signed on, he had some hesitation about it because he didn't know how he knew this was all going to come down to the execution of it, right? And then he was like, when you read this as a script, this can lean one of two ways, as very spoofy or very horror comedy. And he's like, and I don't know what the filmmakers are trying to do. And so he asked to have a conversation with me. And that's when he and I said, we had almost the same conversation you and I already had about a horror comedy. And I talked to him about Ghostbusters and Scooby-Doo and just the importance of stakes and the jokes never feeling like they're the point, but still within the context of the story and serving the story. And he was like, that is how I feel. And that's the movie that I'm interested in being a part of. And so that was cool, because after that convo, he came on board and we were like, just both, just like bound at the hip, just aligned on just how we wanted to pull it off. You want an
actor who also, has the same idea of what you're going for instead of
totally
each other.
It's really funny because I remember watching this video of Zemeckis like doing this behind the scenes with Forrest Gump, and they did the table read, and then he's kind of like on camera outside of the table read getting interviewed about his process, and he basically said the point of the table read is to make sure that we're all making the same movie, because I've been in too many situations where we all showed up and it turned out too late that we were not trying to make the same movie.
Yeah,
I was like, man, that's such an interesting point.
The Back to the Future poster behind you, if you ever saw movies that made you about it, and they filmed a lot of it with a totally different actor, and he just realized it wasn't working.
That was one of the big inferred instances, right? Wow, we're not actually here to make the same movie. Like Eric Stoltz had a very different interpretation of Marty. And what's funny, because every time I've heard what his thoughts were about it, I'm a giant Back to the Future nerd. I mean, I got a DeLorean on my arm.
Oh, very cool.
I just love it. Back to the Future 2 is my all-time favorite movie. And but it does, like, Eric Stoltz isn't wrong. Like when he reads his version of the script, I get what he's seeing. It's just not the movie that Zemeckis was making. So I get the importance of a lead actor who's going to carry this thing, wanting to make sure that they're on the same page with the director who's going to be executing the thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because when the two are aligned, pretty unstoppable. And that's definitely how it felt with Fran. Like the fact that we aligned so early on, we were also checks and balances for each other, right? Like he'd be like, Brett, like, is this leaning to comedy, or is this feeling sincere, or is this feeling appropriate, right? Mm. And then him for me, like, what if we did this and I want to come bring a camera, and he's like, I'm worried that might push this too over the top. So it was great because we were both creative partners on it.
Yeah.
And then of course Allison's awesome. Allison Hannigan is just lucked out with her.
Now, how about the sign for the camp? It looks, it looks like an old sign. So it's very well made.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. We had our production designer on the movie was awesome. His name is Matt Whittle, and he just worked day and night, because again, like, our schedule was so tight, and so I had to be very specific about, here's my wish list of everything, but here's my priority, as far as like what we need when, and what feels like it's going to be most important for the story, and I don't know if that guy slept for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Like, I don't know, but like, so much production design was showing up. And when that sign showed up, I was so hyped. I was he only had hours. Like, I think he had started working on it like the night before or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it looks great.
Then I was just like, geez, man, I don't know. I'm also not the craftiest person, so I just marvel at anything like that. Like, just some foam core and this. I'm like, I don't know what you. He actually, what's really crazy is he did something. I've never talked about this. He did some production design that's invisible in the movie. That's unreal. The DP, Andy Strayhorn, who's amazing. He love him. He's like this Aussie guy. And is just like super into horror, and like he was great to work with. But his whole thing was, he's like, to get in the woods, and we're in the swamps of Louisiana, and the swamps are really thick, and so it's like all these cool locations had no access to justifying moonlight easily, or even achieving it artificially, because it was just the trees are also thick. And so he asked Matthew to build fake tree trunks so that he could basically or like put up lights in the swamp, but then cover the stands with a fake tree stump.
True.
So that because the camera was never going to angle high enough to see that there was no tree at the top of it. And I was like, dude, I don't know if Matt has time to like do all this.
Yeah.
And the next thing we know, we had like 5 like 12-foot, 14-foot tall fake trees, like just ready to move around. They're just styrofoam. They're so easy. You could just pick them up and you just put them around the light stands. It was insane. And it was all his hard work. He crushed it. He was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, everything looked like even the mask looks great and the knife, like
Thanks,
was he
man.
the same guy who did those or
So what was cool was the mask was really important to me because, and this is, I know you've mentioned that you had Gary Tunnicliffe on the podcast before. Like Gary helped me with the scarecrows on Husk, and he didn't have time to help me on this one, but he and I have just had like long conversations about what makes a mask iconic, what makes a mask scary, you know? And my lean, for better or worse, has always been the Michael Myers lean, which is the simpler, the scarier, the less expressive, the scarier, because now you can project more onto it. You know, like I always get annoyed by the horror movies that have characters that look like their mask is out of a Halloween spirit story, you know, where it's just kind of a ghastly smile and like an over top gruesome face where it's like,
I really like Black Phone, but I do a video series, Dinner and a Movie with my friend Annabelle. We talk about the movie after dinner or during dinner, but that was her problem with Black Phone was she's like, how does these masks are too intricate for just like
oh man, Black Phone was so good.
Yeah, it's really, I agree. Liked it. That was her only issue with it.
I did like though that the mask was modular, was changing.
That's what I
did
like that. Yeah,
like
I like that has no mouth at all, and
that was terrifying. Mm-hmm. But it also like the story of that. Oh man, I could talk about that movie like a lot. But that one, when he was wearing kind of the version of it that had the gruesome smile on it, it wasn't without intention, right? Because he's basically lying to this kid, like he's kind of deceiving, like trying to come across as friendly, you know, and like all that. And I was like, man, this is where it works. Like where it bothers me is when a guy jumps out around a corner with a chainsaw with this like kind of crazy grin clown face, where I'm just like, I have nothing to project onto you. Like you're just, and you're also not scary. Like it's almost borderline ridiculous. But all that's to say is many discussions were had about the mask. Mm-hmm. And Matt Whittle, again, like he, on top of production design, he just had a foam head and they just got a bunch of clay and he just took sketches I had done and just started live whittling this clay version of the mask in front of me. And I give him input while he was doing it. And we did like 4 or 5 different iterations of the mask because of like the voodoo history. At one point, there was one that had kind of more of a voodoo vibe. I only knew that I wanted it to feel tree based, but I was like, but I want it to feel simple. That was just really tricky. But then after all those iterations, we had to send those out to the executives to go, who's feeling what? And I expressed what my preference was. And then thankfully my preference was the one that we got to go with. And then we had another guy, mask maker, who actually took his clay prototype and made he had to make a few masks. He had to make a foam one that could be worn for stunts, which was hilarious because it was so light it'd fall off the actor's face all the time.
Yeah.
We had a different guy that played the killer half the time. Well, probably 3/4 of the time. Fran and the stunt guy would trade off who was actually behind the mask. But Fran did want to do as much as he could. But the foam one would just like fall off his face. It had like sunglass things on it to like hold it onto his ears. We had to like hide it under hair. And I'm like, oh man, if people see this, we are going to get shredded.
Yeah.
And then there was like kind of a heavier, more like hero one that we could like get close up on and look really cool. But I was really happy with the mask. And then the knife was crazy too, because the knife that's the other horror debate, right? It's like, what is the weapon? And you want it to be something iconic. And Michael and Jason have kind of cornered the market on the most practical options.
And
then, you know, like Leatherface kind of took the other most exciting one. So you kind of, it's actually something I'm sure you're like going to watch horror movies. I'm always so entertained. Like, oh, what are they going with? Oh, a pitchfork. Ooh, a modified pitchfork. You know, but like, what are they going to use? And so, when the backstory kind of developed and Louisiana became the setting, kind of started turning into there's this cursed ritual backstory. It'd be cool if there's something that feels slightly ritualistic or like ancient or period about this weapon, and it's not modern, and then introducing the alligator jaw onto the dagger and all that stuff. I was like, oh, okay, this is either ridiculous or cool. I think it's cool. Hopefully everyone else thinks it's cool too.
Yeah, no, it looks great. I really like it. And not just because you're here, I do. But
cool.
Real before I forget about the Black Phone, that's an exception to well, it's not Stephen King, it's Joe Hill, but a short story that actually works for the movie.
Yes,
I went and read it before I went to see it, which probably isn't always the best idea. You should probably read it after. But and I was like, I don't know how they're going to make this into a movie because it's very, very short, and there's really just the two characters, and there's no real payoff of any kind. But they just kind of took the idea and really
it's a great exception. I agree. Like, it really is almost like, because so many movies also start with a concept, right? And that's a short story that felt like it introduced a concept. And then it's like, okay, if this is the concept we want to go with, how do we explore it? And I thought they did a brilliant job with that, making the Ethan Hawke's character the string, or what was it? What do they call it? Not the snatcher, but the grabber.
The grabber, yeah. Yeah, because the grabber, people don't know so much different looking than in the
short story. Yeah, the short story is like, isn't he like, he's like super heavy and like just kind of like a slob.
Yeah, just like a gross.
But he was very intriguing. Like, they just added so much depth to him, which made the story feel like he would be stretched. But then also adding the kind of stories of each of the kid and each of the other kids. And each of the other kids had one piece that they were introducing that would pay off in the end. I thought Black Phone was just
and
crazy brilliant.
I think they left enough up to your imagination where you could envision things being a lot worse than what you see in the movie. Just like,
oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that.
Without a shirt on, and they're talking about playing this, and your mind goes to really terrible things which you don't necessarily want to see filmed. So
exactly, it's funny you say that, because that was my big hesitation seeing it. The only reason I didn't run to the theater was because I was nervous about that. I was like, what are they gonna do? And I got kids, so I was like, that stuff like really, like, I know it eats away at everybody, but it like just kind of haunts me like on a level it didn't before I had kids. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And there's a bit of an elegance to the way that it implies certain things and kind of walks up to the line but never crosses the line.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is actually really kind of masterful, the way this movie implied much darker things without going there.
Yeah. And if you can pull it off, it's because you can imagine much worse things than you really want to actually see.
Yes, that's it.
Like a theatrical release movie. Yeah. I always think that's really the hardest part about the end of any type of it whenever they film it. Is you can't really film what Pennywise is, or the deadlights, because it's like the worst thing you can imagine, which should be the scariest thing. That would be different for everyone. So it's always a letdown if it's a big giant spider or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No, so true. I actually really loved the way that the latest movie handled it. I thought it was actually kind of cool. But you're right. Like, it can't fully deliver on what the book delivers. But I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. I really like both versions of Pennywise, because both of them played it very differently. And I think there's better things in both of them. I do think that the newest one, they did a better job of making Pennywise seem like something totally unworldly, like something from, totally alien.
Yeah. And something kind of seductive to the kids. Tim Curry's Pennywise, I was like, I would go nowhere near that guy.
Right. Yeah.
But you're right. I recently rewatched it, and I thought the same thing. I was like, there are aspects of it that the menace is different, the tone is different. They both work.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And the kids, I think, are in both of them. Well, everyone, but the kids especially, I think, in both of them are great.
Agreed.
I even think that's the best part of the novel, is the parts with the kids.
Yeah. I agree. And it's what I really loved about the way that they split the two movies, the idea of splitting it between the kids and the adults. Because I was like, I kind of am excited to have an experience of just the kids part of the story.
Yeah.
And now I like chapter 1 way better than chapter 2 for no reason other than it just feels like horror Goonies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't know if you ever read it. This isn't a Stephen King podcast, but I walk a lot, so I listen to the audiobooks when I'm walking. 11/22/63, I think, is one of King's best
I haven't read it.
books. and there's connections. I won't give it away. There's connections to it, but I would highly recommend.
That's cool.
Yeah. If you just read what it's about, sounds maybe even something you might not be into. It's about like a time traveler trying to stop the JFK assassination, but there's a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
I heard I haven't watched the show. I heard it's not particularly good, but the novel I thought was one of the best I've read. My brother really liked it. I've heard other people not like it, but I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, anything Stephen King. I actually, when I started pitching Husk around, one of the things that everyone asked me was if there was a Stephen King short story I'd want to adapt into a feature. And my pitch to everybody was 1408. That used to be my favorite.
Yeah.
My favorite short story, but then lo and behold, it was already in development. But that was one where I don't know if the feature worked quite as well.
Yeah, it's not the best, I don't think, but yeah.
Yeah.
I always think that's the ones they should remake, though, where like a lot of the King ones where the movie wasn't perfect, instead of remaking the ones where I think, like, I personally love the original Pet Sematary, so I don't really why remake it, you know?
Yeah, I felt that way. Like I was excited to see it get made into like a
because it's a little
big
different.
budget
It's a TV,
Hollywood movie. Yeah, because it was a TV movie, and I was like, oh, I'd love to see this get like the actual like proper Hollywood feature film treatment. But yeah, I did agree about Cemetery. I was like, man, Pet Sematary freaks me out still. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best adaptations. There's like a dread throughout the whole movie. Like, you feel like everyone's first. And I think it's interesting that the ghost is like the most positive character in the whole movie. He kind of like, death isn't the worst thing that can happen. So, stay away from meddling with all these things.
Right. Yeah. Like it kind of makes it feel like the best of the Twilight Zone, right? Where like these characters, you're like constantly dreading the decision they're going to make and the consequence of their decision. And like, it's so good. I love it.
Yeah. I think it comes out next week on Netflix. They made a movie off. It's a short story from If It Bleeds, which is a more recent King. It's like a collection of short stories. Yeah. And they give away what it's about right in the title, though. It's like,
Mr. Halbrand's
phone, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Halbrand's phone. Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. I was like, oh, this is cool. It's kind of funny to get two King family horror phone movies.
Oh yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Oh, actually, Joe Hill, from what I understand, he wrote the ending for 11/22/63. I think Steven had a different ending, and then Joe actually helped to make a different ending, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, that's cool. That is interesting.
But like I said, I started walking a few years ago a lot, and I listen to audiobooks. So I've been flying through all the King books that I never read, and it's been a great time.
What's been your favorite book so far?
I really like The Dead Zone. I think that's one of my favorites. The Dead Zone, Salem's Lot. I really like a lot.
Yeah, Salem's Lot is awesome.
Yeah.
Dead Zone. You're not the first person I've heard revisit that and really love it. Like a buddy of mine reread it. I was like, this is so much better than people realize.
Yeah, it's because when I was reading it, like I thought it was the end, and then I looked and it still had like 12 hours left. I was like, what are they going to do for us this book? And then at first I'm like, oh, why didn't they just end this? But then it becomes like a whole other story, and I'm like, oh, this makes I don't want to get into it, but it's
almost like the sequel.
Yeah, it really is an epic story, which I know that I never did watch a series, but it could be told over like a 2 or 3 series show, especially now that they do like 8 to 10 episodes, per season.
Right. A lot of King stuff lends itself because he goes pretty deep into some of the mythology and like the lore and setting and history of stuff. It's like a lot of stuff lends towards longer form storytelling for sure.
Yeah. I started listening to this. I finished it later on, but The Stand, and it was right when the pandemic started. And so I'm listening to it, and it's all about these people getting sick and dying. And this was like weeks into the shutdown. I was like, and we didn't know how, what was going to happen. I was like, I can't listen to this right now. It's a really bad time.
This is touching too close to reality for me at the moment.
This wasn't a good idea.
I get that for sure.
Yeah. How about you? What's your favorite King stories? Well, you said 14.
I always really loved it. I'm a big fan of short stories. 1408 was always one of my favorites. He has another short story I love that I feel like could be an incident that leads into a bigger story called The Man in the Black Suit.
I don't think I've read that one.
Oh man, it really freaked me out. It's it's really just like 1940s South, just a kid going fishing alone in the woods when he shouldn't have, to a part of the woods where he's not supposed to go, and he has a confrontation with the devil. Then it's almost like a King version of a Little Red Riding Hood, Big Bad Wolf interaction, but it's like, it's terrifying. And I was like, man, if this is like a scene in a larger story involving these woods and this character that exists in there, and there's so much cool potential there. But that's one of my favorite short stories that he's done too. Yeah. Really freaked me out. It's like a bite-sized Pennywise, where, it's just a short story, but it kind of gives you the vibes of Stephen King's best scary characters.
Cool thing he does that I really respect. He does the Stephen King dollar babies, where you just pay $1 and you can make the move. There's a lot of rules, like you can't sell them or anything, but I just think that that's cool that he does that.
It's really cool, considering he's like arguably the most famous living author at the moment. It's like, man, that's crazy for him to do
if that. You really think about it, because a lot of authors will be famous for like 1 or maybe 2 books, but there's easily like at least like maybe we'll say 6 or 8 that's like iconic, and then there's got to be 12 or more that everyone would know.
Yes,
like I don't know if anyone's ever been that prolific for like stories that like everyone knows.
He's like, I kind of equate him to Spielberg, where he's kind of just a brand unto himself at this point, and it has less to do with the book he's writing and more the fact that he wrote it at this point. Where I just feel like if Stephen King puts out a book, there's a built-in fan base that's gonna go get it regardless, because he did it and they want to see what he did. You know?
Oh, Running Man I really like too. I don't know if it's my favorite, but Running Man, I actually really like the movie, but it's so different, and
it's so different, but it's great.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's probably one of my favorite Arnold movies. I really like the 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I'm a diehard Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. I love Arnold. I think Predator is his best movie. I think Predator is exceptional. I think Terminator is awesome. But anything with Arnold, I'll go watch it.
About Terminator there, I was thinking about this actually when we talked about Eric Stoltz. Is the original guy to play Terminator was Lance Henriksen. They didn't film it, but that was the original idea. That. And like, it's hard to even imagine after the movie. But I was like, I think he could have done it, but I think it would have been a completely different movie. And I don't know if it would have been as successful for an 80s.
You know what? It's almost like it would be the difference between Carpenter's Halloween and Zombies Halloween, right? Where the Terminator would have just been a guy that can't be stopped, as opposed to a truck that can't be stopped.
Right. Yeah. And the other one works much better in the 80s, and then in my opinion, the Rob Zombie one doesn't work as well. Wow.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because what the horror basis of Halloween, what makes Michael Myers scary is that he could be in a crowd and he's not going to draw attention to himself, right? Whereas in Terminator, that doesn't matter. He's not concerned about drawing attention to himself. He's just concerned about his mission. So I think Terminator, I've had this debate recently with a friend of mine where I've always argued that Terminator is a horror movie first before it's a sci-fi movie, because it's structurally, it's built like a horror movie. The dread of it is way more like a horror movie. And the third act of that movie where Reese is dead and she's running from Terminator, it's terrifying. Like, it's the scariest thing I had seen up until that point. Just the fact that the Terminator can't be stopped and everything that she does to stop him doesn't work. I was like, this is like, I've had this nightmare before. I've had this nightmare where you can't outrun the thing that's trying to get you, and Terminator does it. And then Terminator 2 is a great sci-fi action movie, but Terminator 1 is, I think, terrifying.
Yeah. I always think, Alien and Terminator are actually, I think they're better, but I still like Terminator 2 and Aliens because they're fun.
No, for sure. It's like they couldn't really exist without the other, but they are definitely, they're different movies. I don't know if I can say that they're better because I'm so tainted by my preference, because I love them. You're totally
right.
They're
great. Yeah. Maybe not instead of better. I probably would like them better, I guess. They're probably more. But honestly, if I want to watch something fun and big, the other two are more like that.
Well, yeah, because like even Aliens, I've just been introducing my son to those movies, and like the first Alien is a very slow and patient horror movie, right? In the best way possible. But when I was young, it didn't hold my attention span. I was the same way.
I always liked Aliens better when I was young, but then when I got older,
I just wasn't ready. Yeah, I got older and I really, really fell in love with Alien, but Aliens feels like Jurassic Park, where it's just like, here we go. It's just set piece after set piece after set piece. And then, of course, it introduces the Queen. And I mean, it's phenomenal. And it holds up, too. Showing it to my son, I was like, what do you think about this? He's like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, great. That's cool.
Yeah. The Lance Henriksen story is in his book, which I recommend to anyone to read, Not Bad for Human. And something I always quote about it is he talks about when his first like movie was Piranha 2, and he went into it like treated it really serious. And the director of that also did, who was James Cameron, and that's how they bonded, because they were both making what they knew was like kind of a silly horror movie, but they both tried their best. And then when James Cameron did all these other movies, he always included Lance because he knew he was
so
like a
cool
serious actor. Where
so
other
cool.
people, they might just walk through like, oh, this is whatever. I'll just some dumb movie, but it's always. I think that's a good lesson for anybody. You should always try, no matter what the movie is. Try your best.
You just never know. Like at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen, and you also can make something like even going back full circle that You Might Be the Killer being presented with a movie based on a Twitter thread. I mean, I had every reaction to walk away and not do anything, but at the same time, like I was excited at the potential of a horror comedy, and I had no idea whether or not it would work or not, but I had to try, and I didn't know until we screened at Fantastic Fest for the first time whether or not the movie was even going to work or not, because we were working so fast, we had no time to self-assess. Mm-hmm. So we just hoped, and the crowd loved it, and it was like a dream come true premiere as far as just the response to it. It's like everything we hoped would happen happened, and I could have very easily missed all of that, if I hadn't just dared to believe and gone for it and tried, and you also learn some, like I know Cameron's talked about that with Piranha too, how you never know when it's more about the lesson than it is the product,
Yeah. So going into the premiere, I mean, what's that feeling like? I know it recently because my movie premiered at Scream, Fright Fest in London. So it was a very both exciting and nervous experience going to watch it with an audience.
Always. I don't think it ever. I think if there's ever an instance where anybody goes into a screening confident that there's something wrong, I was like, you don't know, because it's up to the audience. So what freaks me out about making movies is that it's the same thing with raising my kids. Like I have a moment in time to do everything I can, and then I have to let it set sail and hope that it sails and doesn't sink, hope that it's safe, hope that it sails for a long time. It's not up to me anymore. And it's terrifying about that with movies, because that first screening in front of the audience is the moment. That's where it's like, this isn't mine anymore. Mm-hmm. It's yours. And I don't know if you're going to be kind to it or if you even like it. I don't even know if it's good yet. I hope it is. But
at that point, it's hard to even watch it as a movie since you've seen it so many times through the editing.
No, it's true. I've told many people this, how I don't feel like I've actually, the window of time that I've clocked between when I've made something and when I see it for the first time is normally about like a year to 2 years, where like I finally go back and watch it and see it objectively as someone who didn't make it, because like you said, like you're so close to it. Like I can't unsee the mistakes. I can't unsee the things I didn't have time to fix. I can't unsee the things I didn't get to shoot the way I wanted. I can't unsee all of the things that I can still see what I intended, even when it wasn't successful, Mm-hmm.
And also I think something some people might not think about is the experience of making it. So if you want to watch, you want to see it as like people who have no idea what you went through to make it. But sometimes it's hard to edit something that like, oh, I had a good time making this in that scene, but does it work for the movie?
Right. No, it's true. And vice versa. Sometimes you didn't get to make a scene nearly as well as you hoped you could, but this is the version you're stuck with, and now it's out there. Like, it's funny. I recently listened to some of the commentaries that Francis Ford Coppola did on The Godfather, and he says that about scenes in that where he's like, "Oh, I just didn't have time to shoot this scene the way I wanted this," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? What?
Yeah, it's like the most
This is great.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie of all time. So yeah,
I love it." But it's such a picture of the process, right? Like of what we're talking about, which is we don't see any of the errors, and he does, and that's what's terrifying about the premiere. And I've had both kinds of premieres. I've had premieres where it was just kind of awkward silence, and I've had premieres where it was roaring applause, and I couldn't have told you that I guessed which one was going to be which before it started. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So how early on, it went to Shudder, right? From the festival?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
So how early on did you know Shudder was going to pick it up?
Well, one of the original producers of it, Craig Engler, runs Shudder, and he became the head of Shudder after he had already been involved with You Might Be the Killer. So he actually had to leave You Might Be the Killer to go take over Shudder. And so so that was kind of built in from the beginning because of his involvement with it. He was like, "Hey, I got to go do this, but when you're done, it's got a home." So that was actually really exciting. There was after Fantastic Fest, there's quite a bit of interest in a lot of people to like do different things with the movie just because it played well and it was kind of buzzy. And but it already had its home at Shudder, so all those conversations were kind of squashed very quickly. But that was kind of nice going into it, going like, we know where this movie is going to be. I know where to tell people to go watch it. And it would have been cool if some of the other things happened too, but this happened. And it was great. It was phenomenal. Shudder was an incredible like home for it to be going to, especially because while we were making it, Shudder was like launching and the whole horror community was like super hyped on it. And so it was kind of nice knowing, hey, well, it was also pressure inducing, in the sense of like, oh, this is going to go.
Yeah, some new thing, who knows? Because I've seen other, streaming sites that sound cool, and they come and go, but Shudder is, just they stayed around and it really grew. I think what I like about Shudder is they've got weird stuff that you might not see anywhere else. It's got a lot of old stuff that I like, a lot of international stuff that you might never have seen without something like Shudder, a lot of independent stuff. And then I think Joe Bob, joining it really also, brought in.
That kind of elevated it to a whole other level. But you're right. It was immediately a platform to see stuff that was otherwise a lot harder to see at the moment. And that's real special. It was cool.
Yeah. How about the physical? Is it out on physical? I assume it is.
It was. I don't know where to find it. I know it's been on iTunes, and then there was a physical Blu-ray release and DVD release, but it was small.
Yeah.
I know it's showing up at a lot of dollar stores. So, if you're at a local dollar store, check it out. It's probably there somewhere.
I always I like people to buy physical, but I'm as guilty as anyone else. I mean, I own a lot of movies, and instead of going to find them, put them in the Blu-ray or whatever, it's easier a lot of times. Like I know it's streaming somewhere, I'll just watch it there. And
that's what I
hate to keep buying stuff, but
buy physical, but I do as I say, not as I do, because I definitely send this stuff. Yeah. Well, I travel a lot with I travel a lot, and like whenever I've been on location for shoots, there's been times where I just wish I had a bunch of movies that I left at home.
Right.
And so I just start traveling with my Apple TV, and I just plug it into wherever I am. I have everything, or I bring a hard drive and I have everything. And it kind of became too enticing to keep that up.
Yeah. If you bring the HDMI cable, you can hook it right up to the TV. And
one and done. You got all of them. So it's kind of.
No, I totally. I mean, this is the first VHS tape my mom bought me back in the 80s, Creep Show. So
that's cool.
There, but I don't watch VHS anymore, but they have a special place in my childhood.
Absolutely. Very special place in my heart too.
Yeah. How about your family when you told them this is something I want to do? I want to make movies. Were they supportive?
Well, they were supportive. I came from my family was full of artists. Like my grandfather was a painter and he's a violin maker, and my mom was a traveling musician for a while, and they kind of got the arts, which I didn't realize was more the exception than the rule because it's just what I grew up with. And so there was actually, if anything, I think from very early on, there was an expectation that I was going to be doing something creative. And there was a little bit of pressure to pick which it was going to be. But when I chose film, that's kind of why I fell in love with film. I was like, man, it's kind of all of the art. It's all art having to work together for this one art.
Yeah.
You have to get painters, you have to get, costume designers, and you have to get actors, you have to get musicians,
makes cool signs.
You gotta get painters, and like it was just all the things that I loved kind of funneled into one thing. And so that's kind of what pushed me towards it. And then it was just nothing but support, which is crazy to think now, because at the time I was like, yeah, thanks. This is normal. And now I know that it's not. So I was very fortunate, and I got put in art schools. So my education was very art focused, and I knew real young that I wanted to make movies. And so a lot of my education was geared towards pushing in the direction of film and stuff, which was great.
This is interesting because a lot of independent filmmakers I have on did not go to film school, and they talk about going on set and learning how to make a movie and stuff. But you did. So what are the benefits of going to film school?
Well, it's there really are arguments for both, because I have friends that didn't, and I have a lot of friends that did. But the biggest benefit I found from film school was that it kind of allowed me to exist under an umbrella of protection to just go experiment and go nuts making stuff that I don't know if I would have otherwise had the means to make. Because aside from assignments, I went to Chapman University, the Dodge College film, and they had a whole warehouse of film equipment, gear, all the stuff that was free to the students. You just had to check it out, and it had to be available. And so all of a sudden I just had resources I wouldn't have had. We had insurance through the school. So we were kind of protected under the entity of the university, which I think was great because I just was kind of given this open plane with all these tools and resources to just go make a bunch of stuff. So when I was in film school, that's all I did. If I wasn't making something for class, I was doing it for fun in my free time with my buddies. We were just constantly making movies, short films, whatever we wanted. And it was a real great training ground for me. But at the same time, everything that I learned about everything that has felt the most necessary about working in film isn't necessarily something that I feel like I learned in film school. I've learned it from being on set and making movies in the real world more. Kind of makes me go maybe we should revise the curriculum on certain things. And maybe they did. It was a while ago that I was in film school, but that's kind of where I feel like the case of not having to go to film school does make a lot of sense. Because I had one professor that was like, hey, if you got $50,000 to go to film school, make a feature film. Or, it's now it's probably it could cost you $150,000 to go to college, go make a $150,000 feature film. And I can't argue with that. I really get it. The main benefit for me was just having time and resources to just fail and succeed on just a ton of different things and just learning experience,
It sounds like a silly thing, but a lot of people just say you have to make something. So either go to film school and learn how to do it or go on sets and make it. But if you just think about it, it's just going to stay in your head and it won't actually ever be anything.
No, it's really true. You're only as good as what you've made. No one cares about a film degree. But my degree hasn't been the reason I got any single job I've ever gotten.
Right.
But the stuff I've made has, as long as someone's making stuff, and then the festivals are great because that's where you get your exposure, And film school helped me learn how to do that. I don't know if I would have been savvy enough to figure that out on my own without film school. But nowadays it's probably way easier than it was when I was trying to figure it out. So
it's also a good way to meet other people and collaborate
you're right. That's the other big thing, was it really put me in a pool of fellow filmmakers, and I got to kind of find my crew and my guys and learn from them, because there's also a lot of healthy competition. It's I'm very much motivated by healthy competition. Otherwise I'd just be sitting in my dorm room just pondering what I want to write, as opposed to feeling the pressure to like, I got to make this like now.
Yeah. I'm glad you said friendly, because I like the festivals. I actually like the festivals a little smaller, so it's like a community aspect.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
usually they're rooting for everybody, but at the same time, like you said, it's like, hey, this guy did this. I need to do something too.
Oh yeah, the smaller festivals definitely feel more like you're celebrating each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to talk out of class, but when I was at Sundance, man, Husk played in a short program with other shorts, and Husk was kind of like unofficially like headlining the thing. Like it was the last short, and it was the longest short. It was kind of like the finale of the program. And man, I had some real hostile encounters with some of the filmmakers that did the shorts that are programmed earlier in the same program, because we all keep showing up at the same events, right?
Yeah.
Man, that was not great. I didn't make a lot of friends there, but I made a lot of friends at other festivals for sure. But man, Sundance, it was like the Sundance staff were amazing. The audiences were amazing, but the other filmmakers our program was just, I feel like it was hostility for sure.
Yeah. I would assume the bigger, like more prestigious they are, it's probably more like that. My local one, Boston Underground Film Festival. There's a real community feel, and everyone. It's a lot of same people. And then some of the guys went on to make, bigger stuff, but for the most part, everyone's, rooting for each other and want to see what everyone's made, which is,
and that's how it should be. Yeah. Making movies is so hard, and we're all making them because we love them, right? It's like we should already be friends.
Right.
It's just,
you have a lot of things in common, and it's a crazy world that not everyone is going to seek out. So yeah.
Right.
So You Might Be a Killer. I love it, and I think it was on my list of the best movies that year. And
thanks. I appreciate that.
Find it and check it out. And what are you working on currently?
Currently I wrote a movie over the pandemic that I've been shopping around. It's horror comedy, and for anyone who cares to know, producers are terrified of horror comedies. And so that's been funny, because it's been a long process of dragging out with a lot of people who love it but are intimidated to hit the green light on it. But so I've been using this the rest of the time I've been writing my next movie, which is going to be a slasher. I'm kind of trying to write my 90s slasher movie.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
And so I'm getting real close to finishing that one, and then I'll start sending it out, seeing who will let me make it. I directed some TV in between. I was actually out in Bulgaria shooting, directing episodes of a TV show while Texas Chainsaw was shooting out there.
I just interviewed the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they made it in Bulgaria.
Yeah, it was funny. It was the same production company, so we were housed in the same building, but on completely different schedules. I was on the TV show schedule, and they were on their Texas Chainsaw schedule. But yeah. So I was crossing paths with them a lot, and then the same team, they did Barbarian out there after I left.
Oh, I didn't even know it was made up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was crazy, but I did that in the meantime, and that was really cool, getting to do some TV and kind of dip my toe in the pool of television episodic directing. And it was a sci-fi show, so like different genres. So that was keeping me busy too, but I'm definitely feeling most at home writing my next horror movie.
Well, very cool. I always look forward to see what you have coming out. And where can people see Husk? Where is that like on?
Yeah, so Husk is it's on iTunes right now. I don't really know where else it is other than iTunes.
Yeah.
But it's on iTunes. You Might Be the Killer is on iTunes. It used to be on Shudder. I don't know if they're bringing it back. They kind of have brought it back and then put it away and brought it back. So, but yeah.
It's currently on. It was on Sci-Fi. If you have like my local, where my cable had it on Sci-Fi.
Nice. Yeah. It's played on Sci-Fi
commercials too. But yeah, that's cool. So I look forward to what you have coming out, and this is very cool.
Dude, I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks for having me on, man. It's been a good chat. It's been good hanging out with you.
We'll do it again sometime.
That'd be awesome. I'm down anytime. Just let me know.
Join us next week. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, all right. And shout out to Gary Tunnicliffe we brought up. I'm looking forward to the new Hellraiser, but I honestly think his Hellraiser Judgment was one of the better sequels. I really liked it.
It's great. It's great. And he's so passionate about like that specific subgenre of the genre we all love. Is so awesome. He's the greatest.
Yeah, he's awesome. All right. Very good. Thank you.